Question: But sometimes Satan foils a child of God. How does this work for good? Answer: I grant that, through the suspension of divine grace and the fury of a temptation, a saint may be overcome. Yet this foiling by a temptation shall be overruled for good. By this foil, God makes way for the augmentation of grace. Peter was tempted to self-confidence. He presumed upon his own strength, and Christ let him fall. But this wrought for his good. It cost him many a tear. He went out and wept bitterly. Matthew 26, verse 75. And now he grows less self-reliant. He dared not say he loved Christ more than the other apostles. Do you love me more than these? John 21, verse 15. Peter dared not say so. His fall into sin broke the neck of his pride. The foiling by a temptation causes more circumspection and watchfulness in a child of God. Though Satan did before decoy him into sin, yet for the future he will be the more cautious. He will have a care of coming within the lion's chain any more. He is more vigilant and fearful of the occasions of sin. He never goes out without his spiritual armor, and he girds on his armor by prayer. He knows he walks on slippery ground, therefore he looks wisely to his steps. He keeps close sentinel in his soul, and when he spies the devil coming, he grasps his spiritual weapons and displays the shield of faith. This is all the hurt the devil does when he foils a saint by temptation. He cures him of his careless neglect. He makes him watch and pray more. When wild beasts get over the hedge and damage the grain, a man will make his fence the stronger. Just so, when the devil gets over the hedge by a temptation, a Christian will be sure to mend his fence. He will become more fearful of sin and careful of duty. Thus, the being worsted by temptation works for good. Objection: But if being foiled works for good, this may make Christians careless, whether they are overcome by temptations or not. Answer: There is a great deal of difference between falling into a temptation and running into a temptation. The falling into a temptation shall work for good, not the running into it. He who falls into a river is fit for help and pity, but he who desperately runs into it is guilty of his own death. It is madness running into a lion's den. He who runs himself into a temptation is like King Saul, who fell upon his own sword. From all that has been said, see how God disappoints the old serpent, making his temptations turn to the good of his people. Surely, if the devil knew how much benefit accrues to the saints by temptation, he would forbear to tempt. Luther once said, "There are 3 things which make a godly man: prayer, meditation, and temptation." Paul, in his voyage to Rome, met with a contrary wind. So the wind of temptation is a contrary wind to that of the Spirit, but God makes use of this cross wind to blow the saints to heaven. Number 3. The evil of desertion works for good to the godly. The spouse of Song of Solomon 5, verse 6, complains of desertion. My beloved had withdrawn himself and was gone. There is a twofold withdrawing, either in regard of grace, when God suspends the influence of his Spirit, withholding the lively actings of grace. If the Spirit is gone, grace freezes into a chillness and indolence. Or a withdrawing in regard of comfort. When God withholds the sweet manifestations of his favor, he does not look with such a pleasant aspect, but veils his face, and seems to be quite gone from the soul. God is just in all his withdrawings. We desert him before he deserts us. We desert God when we leave off close communion with him, when we desert his truths and dare not appear for him, when we leave the guidance and conduct of his word, and follow the deceitful light of our own corrupt affections and passions. We desert God first. Therefore, we have none to blame but ourselves. Desertion is very sad, for as when the light is withdrawn, darkness follows in the air, so when God withdraws, there is darkness and sorrow in the soul. Desertion is an agony of conscience. God holds the soul over hell. The arrows of the Almighty are within me. The poison whereof drinks up my spirits. Job 6, verse 4. It was a custom among the Persians in their wars to dip their arrows in the poison of serpents to make them more deadly. Thus did God shoot the poisoned arrow of desertion into Job, under the wounds of which his spirit lay bleeding. In times of desertion, the people of God are apt to be dejected. They dispute against themselves and think that God has quite cast them off. Therefore, I shall prescribe some comfort to the deserted soul. The mariner, when he has no star to guide him, yet he has light in his lantern, which is some help to him to see his compass. So I shall lay down 4 consolations, which are as the mariner's lantern, to give some light when the poor soul is sailing in the darkness of desertion, and needs the bright morning star. First, none but the godly are capable of desertion. Wicked men do not know what God's love means, nor what it is to lack it. They know what it is to lack health, friends, trade, but not what it is to lack God's favor. You fear that you are not God's child because you are deserted. The Lord cannot be said to withdraw his love from the wicked because they never had it. The being deserted evidences you to be a child of God. How could you complain that God has estranged himself if you had not sometimes received smiles and tokens of love from him? Secondly, there may be the seed of grace where there is not the flower of joy. The earth may lack a crop of grain, yet may have a mine of gold within. A Christian may have grace within, though the sweet fruit of joy does not grow. Vessels at sea, which are richly fraught with jewels and spices, may be in the dark and tossed in the storm. A soul enriched with the treasures of grace may yet be in the dark of desertion, and so tossed as to think it shall be cast away. David, in a state of dejection, prays, "Take not your Holy Spirit from me." Psalm 51, verse 11. He does not pray, says Augustine, "Lord, give me your Spirit," but take not away your Spirit, so that he still had the Spirit of God remaining in him. Thirdly, these desertions are but for a time. Christ may withdraw and leave the soul a while, but he will come again. In a little wrath I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on you. Isaiah 64, verse 8. When it is low water, the tide will come in again. I will not always show my anger. Isaiah 57, verse 16. The tender mother sets down her child in anger, but she will take it up again into her arms and kiss it. God may put away the soul in anger, but he will take it up again into his dear embraces and display his banner of love over it. Fourthly, how these desertions work for good to the godly. 1. Desertion cures the soul of sloth. We find the spouse fallen upon the bed of sloth. I sleep, Song of Solomon 5, verse 2, and presently Christ was gone. My beloved had withdrawn himself, Song of Solomon 5, verse 6. Who will speak to one that is drowsy? 2. Desertion cures inordinate affection to the world. Love not the world, 1 John 2, verse 15. We may hold the world as a posy in our hand, but it must not lie too near our heart. We may use it as an inn where we take a meal, but it must not be our home. Perhaps these secular things steal away the heart too much. Godly men are sometimes weighed down with an overabundance of temporal things, and drunk with the luscious delights of prosperity. And, having spotted their silver wings of grace, and much defaced God's image by rubbing it against the earth, the Lord, to recover them from this, hides his face in a cloud. This eclipse has good effects. It darkens all the glory of the world, and causes it to disappear.